Hello everyone, it's that time again. Here's what else I saw in May that I didn't already tell you about. There was a big appetite for entertainment in my house, so I saw a lot of movies this time, which is pretty amazing considering I couldn't check anything out of the library, and I would say, on average, half the things I watch come from the library. But Amazon Prime and the Watch TCM app, the newly discovered Watch TCM app, really came to the rescue here. Because there are so many movies to discuss, I've decided to break tradition and break up the list into 2 videos. That'll make the whole thing easier for me to film and to edit, because yikes, the longer the video gets and the more pictures I have to put in, the more nightmarish the editing situation becomes. And this way it might be less overwhelming for you. Also, a few of you may have noticed that last month, in addition to listing the titles in the description, I also listed where I watched them. I'll be doing that again for your convenience, although unfortunately a lot of the licenses have already expired. That's the risk with the Watch TCM app. Some of the movies that they put up there are available to watch for a whole month, some of them are only available for a week. So, some of the movies that I'm going to talk about in this collection aren't available anymore. Sorry. Alright, going in the order that I watched these things, movie number 1 is a 2003 action crime film, Out of Time, in which Denzel Washington stars as a Florida police chief involved with a married woman who suddenly finds himself implicated in a double homicide. He has to solve the crime before the investigators connect his name to the case. Bonus complication, his soon-to-be ex-wife is the homicide detective. Honestly, I did not like the first half hour or so, where the main character just keeps making bad decisions. So around the halfway mark, when things go wackadoodle and he finds himself in hot water, I felt kind of like, you had it coming! But it got better at that point, plus it unexpectedly became humorous, as one thing after another crops up that he has to sweat about and try to fix, and Denzel Washington's reactions were very amusing. By the end, you're rooting for him to figure it all out and do the right thing. So, 50% of it I liked. The next item on the list is kind of an outlier here. On YouTube, the National Theatre streamed both versions of its 2011 production of Frankenstein, directed by Danny Boyle, in which Benedict Cumberbatch and Johnny Lee Miller star and swap lead roles. Regarding the production in general, it was rather minimalist, as is the trend nowadays. Simple set, simple costumes, abstract with the odd touch of steampunk. To give you a fair idea what it's like, the first 20 minutes mostly has the creature writhing and flopping on the floor in a loincloth. So, yes, when it first started, I felt a little unsure if I wanted to continue. The script ditches the novel's frame device, as well as Victor's point of view and all the setup, beginning instead with the creature's birth and focusing on his perspective for most of the first act. I'd say the play heavily favors the creature, in spite of the brutality of his kills and a rape which was censored out. He's portrayed as a childlike character, crude but receptive to beauty and education, whose purity is corrupted by the harsh treatment he receives. Victor Frankenstein isn't shown in the same sympathetic light, even when he's the one that's suffering. I remember hearing about this production when it first came out, and I always thought that the idea of having the lead actors switch roles was intriguing and potentially brilliant. As far as that goes, I wasn't disappointed. It was incredibly interesting to watch the 2 performances, not exactly back-to-back, but close enough. I did let a couple days go by in between. Cumberbatch as the creature threw himself into it physically, verbally, the whole works, injected with a surprising amount of light humor, while Miller's Frankenstein came across as selfish and cold and a little unstable himself. Miller as the creature was subtler, and his performance seemed to emphasize the sense of betrayal and true innocence or paradise lost, while Cumberbatch's Frankenstein felt less cruel and seemed more sarcastic and distracted by his own intelligence. I preferred this version and found the rendition of the final scene more moving. All that said, did I enjoy it? I don't know. I appreciated what they did, and the performances were great. It was very interesting, but I'm not sure how much I enjoyed it. It was not the kind of thing that I watch and think, oh, I'm loving this is great. So, but I am grateful that after all these years of wondering what the production was like, I did get a chance to see it. I guess I'll count that as numbers 2 and 3 since it was like watching 2 movies. So, moving along, movie number 4 is a twisty action thriller from 2011 titled Unknown. Liam Neeson stars as a man just arrived with his wife in Berlin to attend a conference. After a car accident, he wakes in a hospital with no memory of how he got there and no papers to prove his identity. He returns to the hotel and finds his wife, but she claims she doesn't know him and is with another man who says he is him. This went in a direction I totally wasn't expecting, so that was cool. This was 2011, so still fairly early in Liam Neeson's winning streak as the unbelievably believable senior action hero that began with Taken in 2008. The film co-stars Diane Kruger as the taxi driver who saves his life, and January Jones as his kind of vacant-looking wife, also Aidan Quinn, Frank Langella, Bruno Gantz, and Karl Markovics, who I spent the whole movie trying to place. Turns out he was in The King's Choice, which I saw a few months ago. There's a pretty good car chase, lots of unlikable bad guys, and lots of instances of Liam Neeson making angry, throaty demands, which is always exciting. Movie number 5 is 1964's The Secret Invasion, a World War II film made by Roger and Jean Corman, similar in plot to The Dirty Dozen, but that came out 3 years later. Stuart Granger leads a group of cons on a potentially suicidal mission into Yugoslavia to break an important Italian officer out of prison. It's not like what is typically known as a Roger Corman film among old horror movie buffs, but you can still spot some similarities, some things like bright red blood and a few startlingly violent images that make you say, these are people with an eye for horror. Along with Granger, the film also stars Ralph Filone, who I think of as the Italian Mr. Rochester, Mickey Rooney, and 3 other men who definitely looked familiar, but at the time I couldn't place any of them. Turns out I recognize Ed Burns from a couple old war movies, Henry Silva from a bunch of things, and William Campbell from various film and TV appearances, but especially from the Star Trek episode The Squire of Gothos. Anyway, the history in The Secret Invasion is a little murky, and the final act is chaotic and discouraging. Not that that was a huge surprise, but the settings are amazing. The city streets, the architecture, so much to take in. And the story is an interesting one, especially once it gets rolling, with good moments of tension, both situational and interpersonal. Movie number 6 is a musical-ish fantasy set in France, 1953's Lili, in which Leslie Caron plays a waifish orphan who latches on to a flirtatious carnival magician she's fallen in love with. Taking a job as a waitress at the carnival, she ends up starting a crowd-pleasing act with some marionettes, even though she's sure the puppeteer, played by Mel Ferrer, dislikes her. This was a cute film, though I feel it could have been better. Caron's character is lovesick and puppyish much of the time, and it's so plain the object of her affection isn't worth it. Meanwhile, Mel Ferrer's character is just as lovesick about her, only he's frustratingly inept at showing it. Not that that wasn't compelling in its own way. I'm impressed that Ferrer could simultaneously be so unlikable, yet so sympathetic. The thing I'd had the most reservations about going into it, the marionettes, turned out to be one of the most enjoyable aspects of the film. The moment they show up is the moment the movie starts to get better. There are a couple fantasy sequences that showcase Caron's talent as a dancer, the last one being a quick scramble on the movie's part to resolve the romance. I'm still not sure I buy it, nor am I crazy about the puppets as life-size people. Woo! But the song, Hi Lily, Hi Lo, is catchy, and I had a good time watching the film, which co-stars Jean-Pierre Aumont as the magician, Zsa Zsa Gabor as his assistant, and Kurt Kastner as the other very likable puppeteer. Last time I did this, I talked about the Jane Russell Robert Mitchum film His Kind of Woman. In May, I was able to watch their other film together, 1952's Macao, a story of mistaken identity set in the far eastern Portuguese port colony. In some ways, I liked this one better than His Kind of Woman. It's a simpler story, an adventure with fewer characters to keep track of, and while it is missing Vincent Price's wonderfully unique flair, it struck me as having a lighter script overall. Russell and Mitchum sizzle once again, swapping saucy looks and one-liners. There are lines that sound like innuendo that may or may not actually be innuendo, but given that they like to market Russell as a sex symbol, it probably was intentional. William Bendix, Gloria Graham, and Brad Dexter co-star. Brad Dexter was the weakest link, I thought, with his monotone, deadpan villain. I suppose you could argue that no, he was just cold and calculated, but that's not the vibe I got. Macao had a tumultuous filming process. Famous director Joseph von Sternberg, though he received sole credit, was replaced partway through filming. Additional scenes were directed by Nicholas Ray, Robert Stevenson, and, hey, Mel Ferrer. Amazingly, the result was not as horribly choppy as you might imagine, perhaps because so much of the film focuses on just a handful of characters played by actors who kept their performances consistent no matter who was at the helm. By the way, for those of you who like to hear about costumes, this film features some very interesting gowns designed by Michael Wolff. Movie number 8 is 1976's The Cassandra Crossing, a long movie with a who's who ensemble cast in which a Swedish terrorist gets infected with a deadly virus, evading capture by boarding a train and placing the unsuspecting passengers at risk. The people in charge, namely Burt Lancaster, decree that no one may be allowed off the train under any circumstances. It's got a lot of similarities to the 1996 TV miniseries Pandora's Clock, but on a train instead of a plane, and I'm not sure anybody outside of my family has even heard of Pandora's Clock, which I saw many times when I was younger. The Cassandra Crossing had the potential to be a great pandemic movie, except the pandemic ends up being more of a catalyst than part of the climax. If you like train movies and virus movies, it fits the bill, but I felt the remoteness and unlikability of most of the characters took away from the story. There's lots of romantic drama and weird relationships. If they'd trimmed that down or cut some things out entirely, they could have made the movie a good 20 minutes shorter. The second half, where the train is barreling toward a bridge that's been condemned since 1948, was where I thought things really picked up, and the final sequence was the best part of the movie. All in all, I'd say it's a decent film built on the Irwin Allen disaster epic model, but it could have been better. Movie number 9 is one I've been seeing on lists of the best films ever made for years, 1948's Ladri, the biciclette, or Bicycle Thieves, or sometimes known as The Bicycle Thief. An Italian movie about a man who needs his bicycle for his new job. When the bicycle is stolen, he and his son go searching for it. This is a film that depicts post-war Italy with unabashed realism. Everyone is poor and desperate for work, employment is tenuous, hope for tomorrow is transient. I admit I felt tremendous suspense during the first part. When a movie is called The Bicycle Thief, and you know the character's bike is of vital importance, you end up getting anxious waiting for the awful moment when the bike is stolen. I expected it around every corner. Directed by Vittorio De Sica, the film stars Lamberto Maggiorani, whose haunted expression shows the hopelessness wearing on him through the course of the day's disappointing search. But it's the little boy, Bruno, played by Enzo Staiola, who really tugs at your heart. He seems to grow up in a day as he follows his dad around, struggling sometimes to keep up with him. He's got the seriousness of a man, but the sensitivity of a child whose feelings are still easily wounded. And there's additional pressure on the father, not just to get the bike back so he can provide for his family, but to live up to his son's expectations. He doesn't want to end up not just a man without a bike, but a fallen idol in his son's eyes. Movie number 10 is a mystery, drama, crime thriller. I'm not sure how to categorize it. From 1958, it's a film titled The Fearmakers, and it stars Dana Andrews as a Korean War vet, a former POW who's just gotten out of the service and is suffering from PTSD-like symptoms. He returns to his old job to find his business partner dead and the company under new ownership. To make things even stranger, he's contacted by a U.S. senator who asks him to secretly investigate his new business partner, played by Dick Foran, who may have had something to do with the old partner's death. What unfolds is a surprisingly gripping and unsettlingly ahead-of-its-time story of political intrigue and corruption. The script is a little on the dry side, with a lot of dialogue-heavy scenes, but it's also got some really good tension. It helps a lot that the film was directed by Jacques Tourneur, known for his work on Val Lewton's films like Cat People and I Walked with a Zombie, as well as the noir Out of the Past. And I also thought Dana Andrews gave an especially good performance. Movie number 11 is another crime film, 1953's 99 River Street, which is about a retired boxer turned cabbie, played by John Payne, who ends up running from the police and the bad guys when a diamond thief murders his cheating wife and frames him. This was a good, entertaining noir. Things get a little confusing at times, what with the criminals having a tendency to try double-crossing each other. The reveal of the body was especially memorable. The main character and his lady friend, an aspiring actress played by Evelyn Keyes, open the cab door and are shocked to find his wife's corpse inside. Not that you ever see the body. Being a movie that features a boxer, there's quite a lot of punching and hitting and knocking around. Too much for my interest. I find that tedious. It also features a unique way to light a cigarette. I don't think I'd ever seen that done before. Brad Dexter plays the main antagonist again, and I'm happy to report that he's not as dull here as I found him in Macao. He puts more energy into this performance, and his eyes, while still cold and kind of dead, have a menacing glitter. Movie number 12 is also a crime drama, probably more emphasis on the drama than in the last film, 1956's Timetable, which was directed by its star, Mark Stevens. A pair of insurance inspectors are tasked with solving a case of theft from a safe on board a train. Based on the title and the opening sequence, I thought this would be another train movie. It wasn't, though. The heist sequence was the only part that took place on a train, which I found a little disappointing. There's a pretty significant plot twist in this one, which was enjoyable because it was so unexpected, so I won't ruin it in case you end up watching this movie. It's kind of slow in spots, and a couple weeks later, I admit I'm having trouble remembering what exactly ended up happening, but in the moment, it was a decent film. And I think we're going to finish up today with movie number 13, made in 1944 but set a few years earlier, Hotel Reserve, in which James Mason stars as an Austrian refugee enjoying a holiday at a French hotel on the southern coast, where he and his fellow guests are unaware that a spy is hiding in their midst. Mason gets picked up by the police when suspicious photographs are developed from his film. Mason is then employed by the police to help them ferret out the spy. This was a very good film, despite a little snap, crackle, and pop in the quality early on. It features some really nice photography with a great setting. Both the interiors and exteriors of the old seaside resort are eye-catching. You know what else was eye-catching? Herbert Lom. Yep, he's in this movie too, and looking good. Don't make it weird. I really enjoyed the movie, which had possibly my favorite James Mason performance I've seen to date. I also liked the film's balance of tension and amusement. It had quite a few funny moments, thanks to the collection of quirky characters. I think I'm going to cut it off there. I'll tell you about the rest of the movies in another video, which I'll try to get done as quickly as I can. I hope you enjoyed the selection this time. There's a list of movies down in the description. If you like, feel free to share your thoughts on anything that I mentioned in the comments below, and I'll be back soon with part 2. Thanks for watching!